I should have been a wee bit more prepared, if I'm honest, but I recorded it because and it blew me away, if I'm honest, because I didn't know what to expect. We talked before about you were preparing for it and things like that, as obviously we talked about preparation previously. So I'm going to slot it in here, and hopefully the content comes across okay. But for me, it was moving for me. And I know when it finished, it was very moving for both of you, and you could see that on the night, and I think it was absolutely brilliant. So I'll let you watch it. It's there, and listen to it.
I'm classic. Only two people still up, me and Simon. I'm still up faffing around trying to decide what to put in my rucksack, and Simon's still up because he knows he's going to have to shepherd this rabble on and off the bed, so he's checking the guidebook one more time. Simon, have you got a couple of minutes? I've got a couple of questions to ask you. How do I put these things on my boots? I've got another question. Will it be snowing on top of the bed tomorrow? I took 3 things from those earlier Kinty meets. Firstly, a lifelong friendship with my dear friend Simon. Secondly, a fascination with Scottish winter climbing. And thirdly, a copy of Cold Climbs. I don't know whose copy of Cold Climbs it was, but I took it away anyway. It was by no means my first climbing book. Since boyhood, I've been fascinated by books about all kinds of adventure, caving, polar, whatever sort of adventure. But my favourite sort of adventure books had been books about climbing big icy mountains. So I took Cold Climbs away and pored over it at home, trying to extract maximum value from it. The first thing I say about Cold Climbs will come as a bit of a surprise to you because I'm here talking about Cold Climbs. As I started to read, the first thing I noticed about it was I wasn't enjoying the experience of reading it. The experience was too immersive. The superb, stark black and white photography and excellent writing evoked the experience of being high on Loch Nagar late on a December afternoon, and even though I was sitting in my warm house, I'd feel a shiver of fear and a shiver of cold. So I'd close the book and move on. The second thing I noticed about it was that it was about climbs in Scotland, Wales, England and Ireland. Mountains in those countries that I might have a chance to actually get to. This was in stark contrast to the other books I'd been reading, where it took till the end of the second chapter before the team had acquired enough funding to set off on their expedition. In these other books, the climbers were doing their climbing under beautiful blue skies, wearing fancy kit, whereas in Cold Climbs, people were climbing in bad weather under cloudy skies, wearing woolly jumpers and Dacksteins and leather boots, and it all seemed a lot more accessible to somebody working as a nursing assistant in Leeds. I was surprised and inspired to discover that there was a beautiful book with dozens of snow and ice climbs in the British Isles that were deemed worthy of being in this beautiful coffee table book. Just before we move on, I just need to point out that on the photograph before, can we go back one? That's not an oxygen bottle over my shoulder. For the avoidance of doubt, Simon and I have never used supplementary oxygen on any of our climbs. Nor indeed have we used supplementary oxygen on any of our climbing in the Himalaya. I'd like to say that I've never used supplementary oxygen, but when I had my last neurosurgery, I was agastified when I woke up that I'd been put on oxygen. Supplementary oxygen. When I asked the nurse how much I was on, he said I was on 4 litres an hour, which is a disgracefully profligate amount of oxygen to be using at sea level. But back to Cold Climbs. Even though these climbs look to be accessible to me, I can see that it was a tough world. The Cold Climbs describes a tough world, the world's early starts of long days of hard climbs and foul weather. And I wondered whether I'd be tough enough. This photograph is Tom Patey. The caption reads, Tom Patey totally clapped out below the tower, the result of inadequate clothing. I knew Tom Patey was a Royal Marine and a prodigious winter climber, so far tougher than me. So I thought it was likely that there might eventually be a photograph of me somewhere saying, Malcolm Bass totally clapped out below the tower, the result of inadequate toughness. A story came down from the frozen north. A story came down from the frozen north of climbing on Ben Varn, of ice-encrusted cliffs, of classic gullies, and fine days. That's the opening chapter, the opening sentence from the Cold Climbs chapter on Ben Varn. What a brilliant first few lines, first few words. A story came down from the frozen north. That clause drew me into the chapter on Ben Varn. It was a mountain I hadn't heard of, but I soon realised it was a mountain I ought to spend more time getting to know. So a story came down from the frozen north. Further on in the chapter it says, despite early reports of massive potential in the corridors of Ben Varn, development has been slow, as it has been other great winter cliffs of the northwest. Its vital statistics, 4 great corridors and 2 miles of uninterrupted cliff up to 1,000 foot high, should have attracted a blizzard of activity. It's never happened. So not only was it a magnificent looking mountain, there also seemed to be a lot of potential. The words massive potential, a lot of potential for the kind of exploratory climbing new routes and breaking new ground that Simon and I were interested in. So we look further into this chapter of, so Cold Climbs is more generous yet than that. This photograph isn't Cold Climbs. It says, March Hare's Gully, flanked on the left by Alice's buttress, on the right by an unclimbed face. March Hare's Gully, flanked on the left by Alice's buttress, on the right by an unclimbed face. By an unclimbed face, what a gift. That photograph sent Simon and I into a frenzy of excitement. This was exactly what we were looking for, an unclimbed face on a big mountain. Cold Climbs is a lot of things, but what it isn't, it's not a guidebook. So Cold Climbs was not strictly accurate at that point. There were 2 routes on that buttress. There was the Adventures of Toad, which meandered up the left-hand side, and Harlequin rib up the right-hand side. In Simon and I's view, it was that those routes were not direct. What we wanted to do was that. Straight up the buttress. It was an exciting idea, but a daunting one. We knew the buttress to be between 300 and 400 metres high, which is long for a Scottish winter climb. We also had no idea how hard the climbing would be. The gullies of Ben Varn are a completely different character to the open faces, so they didn't offer us any indication of how hard it would be. But in a nearby corridor, in that corridor along Corridor Farmer, there's a route called Der Riesenwand, which climbs an open face like this. And Der Riesenwand is a grade 7 climb. And that caused us some consternation, because at that time Simon and I had never climbed a grade 7. We climbed a couple of 6s, but never a grade 7. So we were now looking at the prospect of 300 to 400 metres of winter climbing up terrain harder than we'd ever climbed before, harder than we thought we were capable of climbing. So we looked to Cold Climbs for some words of reassurance, and this is what Cold Climbs says about Der Riesenwand. The most beautiful route on Ben Varn is Der Riesenwand, the first and only penetration summer or winter of the colossal evil face of Corridor Farmer. It is not technically extreme, but surely nothing surpassing it for intimidating exposure. As you hand traverse on axis past the last bulge hanging over the abyss, try speaking and watch it fall free for 800 foot to the base of the cliff. All this on limited protection, suspect belays and a bivouac on the first and only ascent, making this a route not to be undertaken lightly or ever forgotten. So now we have the prospect of a 300 to 400 metre route harder than anything we'd ever, on harder ground than anything we'd ever climbed before, on suspect belays and dubious protection and unremitting exposure. But nothing daunted, or actually a little bit daunted, we went to the quarry in January 2004 after a long cold spell had frozen the highlands deeply. And then the hills had been blanketed by snow. And we managed to start the climb right at the very toe of the buttress. We found this groove going up from the toe of the buttress and started climbing up it. It was superb, magnificent climbing with positive flakes and really well frozen turf and good foot ledges and deep cracks. So the talk of dubious protection was proved unfounded. We got good gear and good belays, and the climbing was just a sheer joy. Very positive. And for 6 pitches, it went on up beautiful, really positive climbing. During the first 6 pitches, we were enjoying ourselves so much, and we hadn't said so we're actually getting up this thing that project we've been dreaming about for months. We've actually been getting up it, and the climbing was so good. We just stopped and started whooping with joy and delight, and in the enclosed corrie of Corrina Point, our whoops echoed around the corrie, whooping of sheer joy. Then we carried on for a couple more pitches of beautiful positive climbing. And we were pleased that each time we came to a barrier wall, there was a fault or chimney or groove directly above us, which enabled us to keep taking a straight line up the face without having to have long meandering traverses. But all good things come to an end. And it came to an end at this pitch, on pitch 7, at this horrible slab. Now this will be a delightful pitch in summer on rock boots, on the rough sandstone. In winter it looked horrible. Rounded sandstone covered in a layer of powder snow. I set off up it and precariously wobbled my way a few metres up it, noticing and found very little protection. So it was very precarious. I kept wobbling my way up until I found a hairline crack into which I could get a blade peg. I hammered the blade peg in and took a moment to collect my thoughts. Consciously I thought I could lower off from here and go back down to the traverse ledge below this pitch and then try and outflank the pitch by a long traverse. And my conscious thought was, that would be a terrible shame. The line so far had been delightfully straight, just exactly what we'd set off to do, and it would be such a waste of our great opportunity to make a horrible, ugly traverse out to the left. That's what I was thinking consciously, but unconsciously I was influenced by the behavioural models of cold climbs. In cold climbs, the leader doesn't sketch around for a few minutes, then lower off, and then make a long, ugly traverse to get round the crux pitch. In cold climbs, the climbers just press on through all kinds of difficulties. So influenced by the modelling of cold climbs, I pressed on. And as I pressed on, as is often with the way we're pressing on, I was rewarded with patches of thicker turf and better footholds, and also more hairline cracks, which I managed to put very small wires. And I kept pressing on, and eventually the slab ran into the crest of the buttress. And on the crest of the buttress, the climbing once again changed back to the joyous, positive climbing we've been having further down. And it was in a stupendous position, because now we're on the crest of the buttress, we were looking down into Mad Hatter's Gully. So we're looking down into the Gulf of Mad Hatter's Gully, the great chasm of Mad Hatter's Gully. And we proceeded upwards, enjoying the steep, until it gradually started to grow gloomy. As it started to grow gloomy, I started to get anxious. Human beings are not long away from being, not many generations from being small, defenceless prey creatures. And when it starts getting dark, we like to get somewhere warm, safe and protected. We were not somewhere warm, safe and protected. We were several hundred metres up a steep buttress in the northwest Highlands of Scotland, so a bit of anxiety could be expected. As I got anxious, I started trying to rush, hoping to get to the top of the cliff before full darkness fell. And as always with this way, I was always trying to rush, it got counterproductive. I slowed down, and then eventually I realised there was no way we were going to make it to the top of the buttress before it got completely dark. Full dark came on, and as full dark came on, we put on our head torches and put on our big belay jackets and our big mitts and just slowed down. And once we realised we weren't going to make it to the top of the buttress, once we'd accepted that we were in for a night shift, we just settled into it and started climbing in a disciplined way, slowly and more disciplined, pitch by pitch, more delightful, positive climbing. All we need to do from there was we took responsibility for making sure that both of us were adequately hydrated and adequately hydrated, adequately fed. So before each of us was set off for the lead, the other would cram a handful of squashed up jelly babies into their mouth. And it kept on going. The climb kept on going. Each rock tier we came to, we found a groove or a corner or chimney that would take us directly up it, so we kept moving directly up the cliff. As we got nearer the top of the cliff, a big moon came out, and suddenly we saw that we were only two rock tiers from the plateau. And Simon led through those 2 rock tiers, a direct line straight through the last 2 rock tiers, in keeping with the direct line we'd taken through the rest of the route. And we emerged onto the sunlit plateau, the moonlit plateau. Onto the moonlit plateau, after 370 metres of climbing, we were absolutely delighted. We were euphoric. We'd done exactly what we set out to. We created a direct line up the unclimbed wall. We were super chuffed. We climbed a climb that was not only inspired by co-climbs, but we hoped worthy of co-climbs too. So thank you, co-climbs. Thank you for luring us into your icy world. And thank you for enticing us to Ben Varn. And thank you even more for shining a light onto that magnificent unclimbed wall on which Simon and I have spent 3 memorable days and had the privilege of creating 3 long new routes up that unclimbed wall.
So, as we watch that, I'm keen to know about the project book and all the